What if two of Earth's greatest minds, one driven by ego and vengeance, the other by guilt and redemption, were torn from their universe and thrown into the most brutal war the galaxy has ever known? What if Dr. Doom and Iron Man landed in the grim darkness of the Warhammer 40K universe, where there is only war? Imagine it, no Avengers, no Latveria, no Earth. Just the endless void of space ruled by gods of chaos, where humanity's faith is its only armor. A place where even genius can't outsmart madness. But here's the question: who would adapt faster? Tony Stark, the man who builds to save, or Victor Von Doom, the man who builds to rule? Because in the 41st millennium, mercy is weakness and arrogance is death. Before we dive in, here's a little challenge for you. Stay with me till the very end, and you'll uncover who truly becomes the god of machines in this twisted universe. Trust me, this is one story you don't want to skip. The stars flicker cold and lifeless as a warp storm tears open reality itself. A rift howls through space and time, one that doesn't just bend the laws of physics, but mocks them. Out of that storm, two figures emerge, one in emerald armor etched with mystic runes, the other in bleeding edge nanotech plating. Both disoriented, both furious, both alive in a universe that should have erased them on sight. Iron Man's HUD screams with unreadable data, nothing matches known star charts, and his AI loops in confusion. Doom, on the other hand, kneels, pressing his gauntlet into the ashen soil of a dying planet. He doesn't question. He observes. The air burns with radiation. The sky roars with the screams of distant battle. Doom's eyes narrow behind his mask. A universe where science has rotted beneath superstition. He mutters, "Perfect." Stark looks up, scanning the heavens choked with warships the size of continents. "This isn't space," he says under his breath. "This is hell with engines." And so it begins, the clash of two geniuses, lost among gods and monsters, where technology isn't worshipped but feared. One will rise, one will fall, and the galaxy itself will remember their names. Have you ever wondered what happens when genius meets a godless universe where faith is power and knowledge is heresy? In a galaxy where even machines whisper prayers before they awaken, two men of science now stand accused of blasphemy simply for existing. The dust of the battlefield still swirled around them, a storm of ash and static that shimmered with energy from the warp. The landscape stretched endlessly, mountains of metal and bones, rivers of rust, skies torn open by lightning that screamed like tortured souls. Doom stood tall, his cape torn and scorched, yet his arrogance remained untouched. Beside him, Iron Man scanned the horizon, his armor flickering as it struggled to recalibrate in an alien system. "Tony Stark," Doom said coldly, his voice echoing through the helmet's comm. "Link, it seems the fates have bound us once again, or perhaps cursed us." "Doom," Tony replied, his tone half amusement, half disbelief. "You're welcome. By the way, I just kept us from being turned into cosmic dust." "And yet," Doom countered, "you do not comprehend where we are. Look around you. This is not your fragile reality." Stark's scanners flickered alive. The readings made no sense, radiation off the charts, energy signatures far beyond any known element. More alarming was the discovery of a massive object approaching their position, a fortress on tank treads, bristling with cannons, bearing a symbol, a two-headed eagle, wings spread in divine judgment. "Oh great," Tony muttered. "Looks like we just met the local welcoming committee." From the fortress rolled out men in heavy armor, their banners drenched in holy iconography. The Imperial Guard, warriors of the Imperium of Man, and leading them, a towering space marine, a giant in ceramite armor, blue and gold with the sigil of Ultramar. His voice boomed through the comms. By the will of the Emperor, identify yourselves. Tech heresy is punishable by death. Doom raised a hand, arcane energy spiraling between his fingers. Heresy, he repeated, amused, a word born of fear. Wait, Tony interrupted, lifting his hands in mock surrender. Let's not start with death threats. We're visitors, lost travelers, if you will. But reason was not a language the Imperium spoke often. The Marine's bolter lifted, locking onto Stark's chest. The air trembled, a heartbeat before war. Doom's laughter cut through the static. They threaten us with annihilation, fools. And then it began, the first battle of two outsiders against an empire of fanatics. Doom unleashed mystic energy, green lightning spiraling across the field, melting armor and warping flesh. Iron Man's repulsors blazed, cutting through waves of soldiers like the wrath of a dying sun. The ground quaked. But this was not victory. For every soldier they fell, 100 more appeared. From orbit, a ship loomed a cathedral in space, the wrath of the Imperium descending. Stark's armor screamed warnings. Doom, they're calling in an orbital strike. We need cover now. Doom raised his gauntlet toward the heavens, defying even the void. Let them strike. Doom does not hide. Doom endures. The blast hit. The sky exploded in holy fire, and yet, when the smoke cleared, the impossible had happened. A shimmering dome of emerald energy stood where the two men had been. Doom, breathing heavily, knelt inside the barrier, his armor cracked, but his will unbroken. Tony stared in disbelief. You just tanked an orbital bombardment. Doom's reply was calm, almost bored. Magic, Stark. A science your mind still refuses to grasp. Yeah, Tony said, smirking behind his helmet. And you still refuse to admit your ego's bigger than a battle barge. But even as they argued, both men saw something on the horizon, a shape moving within the warp storm. Metallic, gigantic, alive, a titan, a godma, sheen of the Imperium miles tall, each step cracking the earth, its weapons capable of vaporizing armies. Tony's voice dropped to a whisper. Okay, Doom, maybe we should run. Doom's eyes gleamed through the green glow of his mask. No, Stark. This is where we begin. What if genius itself became heresy? What if every spark of invention, every act of creation, was seen not as progress, but as a sin? That's the nightmare reality Doom and Stark now stood in, staring up at a titan that blotted out the sun. The machine was a god, not a metaphor but a fact in this grim universe. The Imperium called them the god engines, titans of war worshipped by priests, not engineers. Each movement was accompanied by ritual. Each weapon fired only after prayers to the machine's spirit. It was faith wrapped in iron, and to Tony Stark, it was insanity. Tell me I'm not seeing this. Stark muttered as his scanners pinged back, a silhouette hundreds of meters tall, walking like a living cathedral. They're praying to reboot their systems. Doom watched in silence, his cape whipping against the rising storm. His eyes gleamed with both disgust and fascination. Imagine Stark, a civilization that builds empires across the stars yet fears the very spark that gave them light. Their ignorance is beautiful, beautiful, Tony barked. They just tried to kill us because they think why. Phi is witchcraft. Doom turned slightly. And yet they command legions, worship machines that breathe fire, and rule millions of worlds. Power, Stark, always finds its form even in madness. The Titan's shadow grew darker. Artillery fire shook the ground, the air burned. Tony's AI, still glitching from the warp interference, screamed multiple alerts. Doom, we can't take that thing head on, Tony said, already scanning for cover. My armor's running on fumes, your shield's cracked, and they've got enough firepower to turn both of us into subatomic dust. But Doom didn't move. He simply raised his arm and traced ancient symbols in the air. The runes glowing green as space itself began to distort. Then let us borrow their strength, he said quietly. Borrow. Doom's spell pulsed, reality rippled. The Titan staggered, its massive gate faltering for a heartbeat. The adepts around it screamed prayers of purification. Doom closed his eyes, channeling the warp energy like a conductor shaping a storm. Tony's HUD flickered. "What are you doing?" "Showing you," Doom said, his voice layered with echoing tones, "that science and sorcery are but two languages of the same truth." And then it happened. The Titan bowed. Not willingly, not fully, but for the briefest instant. Its head lowered as though acknowledging something greater. Doom's gauntlet blazed with energy drawn directly from the warp core beneath the earth. Tony's mind raced. "He's hacking the machine spirit." "Doom, stop. You don't even know what you're connecting to." "Oh, I do," Doom said, his tone almost reverent. "They call it the machine god, the Omnissiah. I call it opportunity." The Titan fired. The ground erupted, flames washing over the field. Tony dived aside, armor shielding him barely enough to stay alive. Doom was hurled back, his barrier shattering like glass. The impact left a crater of molten rock. For a long moment, silence. Only the distant wailing of servitors filled the air. Then, a hum. Tony forced himself up, systems screaming in protest. He turned and froze. Doom was standing again, but his armor had changed. Where the emerald once shone with magic, it now pulsed with mechanical life. Warp, forged runes intertwined with circuitry. His mask flickered with glowing red symbols. The sigil of the Omnissiah itself burned into his chestplate. "What the hell did you do?" Tony whispered. "I adapted." Doom replied, "In this world, to rule, one must first belong." Tony took a step back. "You merged your armor with their machine cult. You've literally made yourself into a heresy." Doom's eyes flared crimson. "No, Stark. I've made myself into a god they can understand." Before Tony could respond, dropships screamed through the clouds, red, robed tech, priests of Mars descending, chanting binary prayers. They saw Doom and fell to their knees. "Omnissiah," one whispered through vox distortion, "you have come among us." Tony muttered, "Oh, this is going to be a problem." And it was. Because the Adeptus Mechanicus, the priests of the machine god, now believed Dr. Doom was the incarnation of their deity. Doom turned to Tony, voice dripping with triumph. "You see, Stark, in your world, you built monuments to your ego. In this one, they'll build temples." Tony clenched his fists. "And you think they'll just let me live?" Doom tilted his head. "That depends, Stark. Will you kneel, or will you compete?" The storm thickened above them. Thunder split the skies like the crack of divine judgment. The Titan's sensors reactivated, this time bowing its head fully to the emerald, armored figure before it. Doom smiled beneath the mask, and somewhere deep in the warp, something watched. Something old, hungry, and amused. Because even gods enjoy a good rivalry. What if survival in a universe ruled by faith and fire required not just strength, but cunning? Tony Stark now understood in Warhammer 40K, genius alone does not dominate. You must bend others to your vision, forge alliances in the shadow of gods, and defy the impossible. The battlefield had quieted, though the air still trembled with warp energy. Doom stood atop a ridge, his emerald armor fused with Adeptus Mechanicus tech, glowing with a power that even the Space Marines dared not approach. Servitors scuttled at his feet, priests whispered prayers, and a Titan, once a god unto itself, knelt in submission. Doom was no longer merely a man. He was a force the Imperium feared, though they didn't yet understand why. Tony watched from the wreckage of his last skirmish, repulsors flickering, armor systems barely holding. He clenched his fists. "I can't let him do this," he muttered. "If he controls the Mechanicus, he could take the Imperium, and then the galaxy." And then it hit him. If Doom could merge with the machine god's priests, then he could do the same. But in a different way. Tony's mind raced, calculating, scheming. Where Doom used fear and reverence, Tony could use inspiration, ingenuity, and the allure of invention. He had survived cosmic storms, alien invasions, and the Hulk. He could survive this. He activated a hidden protocol in his armor. Miniaturized drones unfolded across the battlefield, scanning, repairing, and repurposing the wreckage. Repulsors flared, carving out a defensive perimeter. From the smoke, he began constructing not a fortress, but a factory of war, powered by stolen warp energy and salvaged tech. Doom's voice echoed across the battlefield, calm and condescending. "You attempt to rival me, Stark, in a universe where gods bow at my feet." Tony's HUD glowed with schematics. "Rival? No, Doom. I'm not here to rival. I'm here to survive and win." The first soldiers to respond were rogue tech. Priests, heretics of Mars, curious, ambitious, willing to listen to a voice that promised creation instead of worship. Tony offered them innovation, the chance to build beyond doctrine, and the promise that no god would judge them. One by one, they swore allegiance. His forces grew, not in fear, but in fascination. Meanwhile, Doom's control over the Mechanicus tightened. Titans patrolled his commands. Armies of servitors built fortresses of obsidian and emerald. Entire worlds bent to his will, loyal not because of law, but because Doom had become a living legend, a deity that combined magic and machine. Tony, however, was unyielding. He experimented with warp tech, integrating it with his suit, carefully balancing the peril of corruption. His drones, his weapons, his small army of rebels began launching strikes against Doom's fortifications, swift, precise, and terrifyingly efficient. The Imperium watched in awe and confusion. Here were two outsiders, both wielding impossible power, challenging the very hierarchy of their galaxy. And then the first clash occurred. Doom's forces, led by a squad of enhanced space marines, stormed a strategic forge that Tony had seized. He stood at the center, arms raised, repulsors blazing, every shot calculated to disable without killing, at least initially. Doom approached, Titan at his back, voice cold and commanding. "You presume to attack, Stark," Doom demanded. "Do you understand what you face?" Tony smirked, despite the roar of explosions. "I understand exactly what I face. A control freak with a god, complex, and I'm about to teach him the lesson of humility." They collided. The ground quaked, fire met green lightning, and the sky burned with energy weapons. Each strike, each maneuver, was a conversation, a debate of strategy, science, and power. Where Doom crushed, Tony adapted. Where Doom dominated, Tony innovated. But in the shadows, forces stirred. Chaos watched. The warp whispered. The two men were no longer just players in a battle, they were catalysts, the kind of anomaly that could reshape the balance of the galaxy itself. Stark realized something vital. He could not simply react. He had to evolve, transform, and forge allies among the Imperium's disillusioned factions. And he began. The First World fell under his influence not through conquest, but promise. The Adeptus Mechanicus renegades, Imperial guards who had grown weary of endless slaughter, and even a small band of space marines, intrigued by Tony's audacity, joined him. The Iron Rebellion had begun. Doom, watching from his citadel atop a ridge, noticed the shift. A flicker of something, curiosity, perhaps caution, crossed his mind. "Interesting," he muttered. "Stark is learning, but can he endure?" Tony, miles away, looked up at the sky where Doom's Titan loomed. "Endure," he whispered. "I don't plan to just endure. I plan to win." The galaxy held its breath. What if ambition became war? What if the galaxy itself became a battlefield for two of Earth's greatest minds, each wielding power beyond comprehension? Tony Stark and Dr. Doom were no longer mere visitors. They were forces capable of challenging the very foundations of the Imperium of man. The war had begun in earnest. Doom's citadel, a fortress of emerald, lit steel and warp, forged magic, sprawled across a shattered moon, its defenses manned by fanatical tech, priests and squads of space marines genetically enhanced by Doom's sorcery. Titans patrolled its perimeter, massive war engines whose very presence made mountains crumble. Every world under Doom's influence had been reshaped into a testament to his genius, terrifying, perfect, unstoppable. Tony Stark, however, was not idle. From the ruins of a forge world, he had built his own empire of innovation. Factories churned out drones, weapons, and mechanized suits. Rogue tech, priests and disillusioned soldiers flocked to him, drawn by the promise of creation instead of submission. Where Doom ruled by awe and fear, Tony inspired loyalty, a dangerous combination in the grimdark 41st Millennium. The first encounter came in orbit over a shattered hive world. Doom's Titan moved like a predator, each step shaking the planet's surface. Tony's forces, smaller but highly mobile, launched from hidden orbital platforms. Repulsors flared, plasma rounds cut through steel, and Doom unleashed warp energy, ripping holes through the void itself. "You think you can match me, Stark?" Doom's voice boomed across the battlefield, amplified by sorcery and machine. "I am the Omnisire incarnate, a god walking among mortals." Tony's visor glowed as he fired back. "And I'm the storm that gods should fear. Let's see who truly rules." The battle raged for hours, with neither side yielding. Doom's Titans unleashed volleys of energy that vaporized entire battalions. Stark's drones adapted in real time, coordinating attacks with surgical precision. The sky above the hive world glowed with fire and warp lightning, a spectacle that even seasoned space marines had never witnessed. But it wasn't just brute force. Doom's magic allowed him to manipulate technology in ways that defied physics. Bolters fired in reverse, targeting their own squads. Servitors reshaped mid-battle into deadly constructs. Tony countered with innovation, his suits self-repaired mid-combat. Drones merged into weapons platforms, and repulsor beams ricocheted off energy shields to strike hidden targets. Amid the chaos, Doom advanced. His Titan's massive fists crushed terrain and soldiers alike. "Yield," Doom commanded, his voice cold, absolute. "Or perish." Tony's armor sparked under the stress, systems warning of overload, but he stood firm. "I don't yield, I adapt, I overcome. That's what makes me human." The turning point came when Tony activated a new prototype, a fusion of his arc reactor and warp energy stolen from Doom's experiments. The resulting beam pierced the Titan's armor, forcing it to stagger. Doom roared in frustration, unleashing a wave of warp energy that Tony barely absorbed with his armor's emergency shielding. The battlefield fell into tense silence as both men assessed each other. Soldiers and machines alike had stopped, caught between fear and awe. The galaxy watched, though none could comprehend the magnitude of what was happening. Then Doom's voice sliced through the quiet. "You persist, Stark. I underestimated your resilience. But this war has only begun. Tony gritted his teeth. Good, because I never planned to stop. In the shadows of the hive world, chaos stirred, intrigued by the anomaly of two outsiders wielding such power. The warp whispered promises and threats, but neither man noticed yet. Their focus was on each other, the perfect storm of genius, ambition, and power. The first true battle had ended without a decisive victor. But both knew this. The galaxy itself had become their chessboard, and every world, every soldier, every machine would be a piece in a game that only one could ultimately win. The war was no longer just survival. It was a test of minds, of will, and of the ability to bend reality itself. What happens when two outsiders, armed with genius and unmatched power, shake the foundations of the galaxy? In the 41st millennium, the Imperium of Man is a fortress built on faith, fear, and iron, yet even the strongest walls can crumble when challenged by forces beyond comprehension. After the clash over the shattered hive world, the echoes of Stark and Doom's conflict spread like wildfire. Entire sectors took notice. Worlds that had known only oppression and ritual began to whisper of change. Doom's empire of awe and fear expanded rapidly. His warpen fused technology, bending entire planets to his will. Meanwhile, Tony Stark's Iron Rebellion grew stronger, fueled by innovation, ingenuity, and the promise of survival through strength, not worship. The first cracks appeared in the Mechanicus itself. Some tech, priests, devoted blindly to the Omnissiah, bowed to Doom as their god incarnate. Others, drawn to Tony's vision of progress beyond ritual, defected, smuggling secrets, weapons, and experimental war machines. The once unified cult now teetered on the edge of civil war, the spark of rebellion ignited by two outsiders who dared challenge their dogma. Tony's voice echoed across the void during a council of his new allies. We're not here to worship, we're here to survive and to win. Every system, every world we take strengthens us, but we must act fast. Doom isn't just a genius, he's a tyrant who inspires fanaticism. We can't fight him directly, not yet. We fight smart. Meanwhile, Doom watched from his throne on a planet encased in green energy. Titans patrolled the skies like vigilant gods. Servitors moved endlessly, and planets reshaped themselves in the image of his perfection. Stark believes himself clever. Doom mused, voice low and deliberate. Yet he cannot comprehend true power. Innovation without control is chaos, and chaos is easily crushed. Across the galaxy, clashes erupted between the two factions. Small worlds became testing grounds for strategies, skirmishes, and shows of power. Tony unleashed fleets of advanced drones and modified titans, striking supply lines and fortresses. Doom responded with devastating precision, warp energy bending reality, massive titans crushing terrain and morale alike, and squads of superhuman warriors enforcing his will. But the Imperium itself could no longer remain neutral. The High Lords of Terra watched in alarm as rumors spread. Outsiders who commanded legions, titans, and gods themselves. Plans were debated in the spires of Holy Terra. The Adeptus Astartes, divided in loyalty, struggled with orders that seemed to conflict with survival. Even the Inquisition, ever vigilant, realized that these two men threatened more than worlds. They threatened the delicate balance of the Imperium. Amid this growing chaos, Tony discovered a troubling truth. Warp energy, unstable and dangerous, was leaking from Doom's planets. Entire star systems were becoming unstable, threatening to collapse into the Imperium itself. If Doom continued unchecked, the Imperium might not just fracture, it might perish. Doom, sensing Tony's growing influence, decided to escalate. He summoned an army of the dead, necromantic constructs powered by warp energy and technology. Entire planets fell into shadow as Doom's forces spread like a plague, crushing resistance with methodical precision. "Let him come," Doom whispered to his generals. "Let him try to match the power of a god incarnate." Tony, facing mounting pressure, activated a new weapon, the Arc Crucible, a fusion of Terran technology and warp, adapted energy capable of reshaping the battlefield itself. It was risky, potentially catastrophic, but necessary. "We either change the rules," he said to his generals, "or we die trying." The first skirmishes of the expanded war were brutal. Titans clashed, world-forged fortresses erupted in fire, and warp storms tore through space. Both sides adapted, evolved, and innovated, each encounter pushing the limits of technology, strategy, and endurance. The galaxy was no longer just a stage, it was a battlefield shaped by the ambitions of two men who had become legends before they had even survived a single year in the 41st Millennium. And while the war raged, both knew something deeper was stirring. From the depths of the warp, forces unseen watched, waiting for the right moment to strike. For anomalies like Doom and Stark were irresistible to the entities that thrived on chaos and ambition. The galaxy teetered on the edge of collapse, and neither man could foresee the true cost of their ambition. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time. What happens when two minds, unmatched in genius, ignite a war across the stars? The galaxy itself becomes a battlefield, every world a prize, every soldier a pawn. In the 41st Millennium, where war is eternal, the arrival of Dr. Doom and Tony Stark shattered the fragile balance of power. The conflict had escalated. Doom's forces now stretched across multiple sectors. His warpen fused Titans crushing planets underfoot, entire cities reshaped in his vision of perfection. Armies of superhuman warriors, Mechanicus servitors, and necromantic constructs swept across worlds, leaving fear and obedience in their wake. His name was whispered in every imperial cathedral, feared as both god and tyrant. Tony Stark, meanwhile, transformed survival into strategy. From hidden forge worlds, he built fleets of drones, mechanized armies, and advanced war machines infused with a controlled fraction of warp energy. Rogue tech, priests, imperial guards, and even a few curious space marines pledged loyalty to his Iron Rebellion, inspired by the promise of progress rather than fear. Every victory gave him more territory, resources, and influence, but also drew Doom's wrath. The first true galactic engagement occurred over the shattered system of Volar Prime. Doom unleashed 3 Titans, each larger than a moon, supported by dozens of warp, empowered squads. Tony's forces were smaller, but lightning, fast and adaptive. Drones swarmed, repulsors fired in complex arcs, and energy shields bent under concentrated fire. "You cannot win by mere survival, Stark." Doom's voice boomed across the void. "You overestimate your allies, underestimate my precision, and misunderstand this universe entirely." Tony's HUD flickered with incoming strikes. "Yeah, maybe, but I don't fight to understand this universe. I fight to bend it to survive, and trust me, Doom, I've got a few tricks you won't see coming." The battle was cataclysmic. Titans smashed moons, energy beams tore through the void, and warp storms twisted reality. Doom manipulated both science and sorcery, bending technology in impossible ways. Tony countered with relentless adaptation, using predictive algorithms to anticipate Doom's attacks and redirect his drones and weapons in devastating combinations. Amid the chaos, entire factions of the Imperium chose sides. Rogue chapters of Space Marines, inspired by Stark's ingenuity, defected. Planets swore allegiance to Doom out of awe and terror. Imperial fleets struggled to maintain order, caught between the rebellion and the tyrant. The galaxy itself seemed to fracture under the weight of two outsiders, their ambitions threatening to rewrite centuries of doctrine and war. On the battlefield, Doom approached Tony's flagship Titan, its emerald armor glowing with warp energy. "Yield, Stark. Accept the inevitability of your failure." Tony's armor flared with overcharged repulsors, shielding his troops from the onslaught. "I don't yield to gods, Doom. I build, I innovate, and I adapt. That's what they can't teach you in Latveria." The clash of their forces reshaped the system. Entire orbital stations were obliterated, cities crumbled under Titan fists, and warp anomalies tore through space, threatening to consume anything caught in their path. Both men realized that their war was no longer just for survival or dominance. It was a crucible testing the limits of power, strategy, and endurance. And then, from the edges of the system, something stirred, a presence beyond comprehension, watching the conflict with amusement. The warp whispered, unseen but felt, hinting that the true consequences of their war had yet to reveal themselves. The galaxy burned, but the storm was far from over. The stage was set. Titans would clash, worlds would fall, alliances would shatter. And in the midst of it all, Tony Stark and Dr. Doom would prove whether genius, courage, and ambition could shape the fate of a universe that had never known mercy. What if even the greatest minds were not the masters of their own fate? In a galaxy already burning with war, the forces of chaos stir, unseen but relentless, eager to exploit any crack in the armor of mortals. Dr. Doom and Tony Stark, despite their genius, were about to discover that power in the 41st millennium comes with a price, and some prices are paid in blood, sanity, and souls. The war had raged across countless systems. Doom's forces had carved swaths of obedience and fear into the Imperium, while Stark's Iron Rebellion had grown into a network of fortified worlds, agile fleets, and devoted followers. But neither man had anticipated the subtle, insidious influence of the warp. It began with anomalies, minor at first. Communications scrambled with whispers that seemed to speak directly into the minds of those near the front lines. Drones malfunctioned without cause, firing on their own allies. Soldiers reported shadows moving where there were no shadows, and a creeping sense of dread spread through both armies. Tony Stark noticed it first. "Doom," he said over an encrypted comm link, "I think we've got bigger problems than you or me." Doom's armor flickered with war, persistent shielding. "What do you mean?" he asked, though his voice betrayed no fear, only curiosity. "The warp," Tony said. "Whatever that stuff is you've been using, it's attracting attention. Not just from the Imperium either. Something else is out there, something old, and it doesn't care about your rules or mine." Doom's eyes narrowed. "Interesting. Then let us see if it will bow to logic, or if it will prove chaotic." The first strike came without warning. Warp, touched demons erupted from the Imperium, tearing through Doom's fortresses and Tony's forward outposts alike. Entire planetary defense grids were obliterated before soldiers could react. Titans clashed with entities that defied physics, creatures of metal, flame, and living nightmare. The Imperium had never faced such incursions, and even Doom's mystic control faltered in the face of the raw, alien chaos. Tony's drones responded with brutal efficiency, but even his systems struggled against enemies that seemed to shift reality itself. "Doom, if we don't cooperate," Tony yelled through the comm, "we both die here, and probably the rest of the galaxy too. Doom did not lower his defenses. Instead, he observed the chaos with a calculating gaze. "Stark, you underestimate this universe. Chaos does not negotiate, and yet it can be studied, manipulated, controlled. Observe carefully." Together, the two men executed an uneasy, silent truce. Stark's technological mastery complemented Doom's warp manipulation. Titans, drones, and warp-fused constructs formed a defensive perimeter while they devised countermeasures. Using a combination of arc reactors and warp sigils, they stabilized localized rifts, driving back demons in a display of destructive brilliance that neither had ever achieved alone. But the cost was high. Both men realized that every time they pushed chaos back, it learned, adapted, and returned stronger. Soldiers fell, planets burned, and whispers of corruption spread among their followers. The Iron Rebellion began to experience dissension. Doom's forces grew paranoid, loyalty fractured under the psychic pressure of the warp. "This war," Tony muttered as he surveyed a battlefield strewn with alien corpses, shattered armor, and cracked servitors, "just got a whole lot bigger, and it's not about us anymore. It's about survival and sanity." Doom's gaze remained cold, unwavering. "Do not fear, Stark. This is merely a test. Chaos seeks weakness. It will find none here. Not while I breathe, not while I rule." Yet even Doom could not predict the subtle influences, the corruption seeping into his most loyal soldiers, the growing whispers in the warp calling for rebellion, the demonic entities that would not yield to even his control. And somewhere, deep within the Imperium, a force of untold malice smiled. The war between Doom and Stark had become a stage, and the shadows of chaos were ready to claim the players. What if the culmination of genius, ambition, and power could determine the fate of Galaxy itself? Dr. Doom and Tony Stark had waged war across countless worlds, tested the limits of science and sorcery, and faced the darkest forces of the warp. Now, the final chapter of their struggle approached, a confrontation that would decide not just who survived, but who reshaped the very destiny of the 41st millennium. The sectors of space were ablaze. Doom's emerald, armored titans strode across planets like walking cathedrals of fear, while Tony's Iron Rebellion struck with surgical precision, fleets darting through warp-torn space, deploying mechanized armies where they were least expected. The Imperium was in chaos, divided between worship of Doom's supposed divinity and fascination with Stark's vision of progress. But both men faced a new, far greater threat, the warp itself. From the depths of the Imperium, demonic entities surged in waves, drawn to the unprecedented concentration of power and ambition. Entire fleets were swallowed in explosions of psychic energy, planets corrupted into nightmarish reflections of their own reality, and soldiers of both factions found themselves battling not only each other but monsters that defied understanding. Tony Stark surveyed the battlefield from the bridge of his flagship. "Doom," he said into the comm link, voice steady despite the chaos, "we're either going to survive this together or not at all. I'm offering a truce, temporary, tactical, because if we don't, chaos wins. And then it's not just us who dies." Doom's eyes, glowing through his emerald mask, met Stark's. "I am not in the habit of alliances, Stark, but even a god recognizes the utility of pragmatism." With that, the two men combined their forces, unleashing a fury that neither had yet dared to demonstrate. Doom channeled warp energy into his titans and sorceress constructs, bending reality around them, while Stark amplified every weapon, every drone, every mechanized unit with unprecedented precision. Their armies struck like twin hurricanes, one of green mystic fury, the other of steel and technology, tearing through waves of demons and corrupted war machines. The turning point came on the surface of a shattered moon, where the largest titan of Doom's army faced Tony's flagship. Energy met warp lightning in cataclysmic collisions that tore craters hundreds of kilometers wide. Doom's voice rang out, cold and commanding, "You cannot hope to surpass me, Stark. I am perfection incarnate." Tony's HUD glowed with the last reserves of power. "Perfection, maybe, but adaptability, that's my edge." Using a daring combination of repulsor fields and warp energy modulation, Tony created a feedback loop, destabilizing the Titan's warp core. Doom's massive war machine faltered, staggering under the strain. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Doom's eyes, a recognition that his supremacy was being challenged. But the war was not yet over. The warp surged, attempting to engulf both sides, manifesting demonic avatars of unimaginable scale. Tony and Doom, standing side by side in a battlefield of ruin, realized that neither genius alone could overcome the storm. Together, they forged a new strategy. Doom stabilized the warp with his sorcery, while Tony channeled energy to construct a massive psychic technology lattice, trapping the demons and purging immediate threat. When the storm finally subsided, the battlefield was quiet, but nothing would ever be the same. Doom's forces had suffered significant losses. His empire fractured in places, but his aura of divinity remained intact. Tony's Iron Rebellion had proven it could stand against gods and warp horrors alike, but at tremendous cost. Both men had reshaped the galaxy through fear, through innovation, and through war. As they stood amidst the ruin, both realized an undeniable truth. The universe of Warhammer 40K did not reward the cautious or the humble. It honored power, ambition, and will, and they were two of the few beings alive who had mastered all three. Doom turned to Tony. "You have survived, Stark. You have adapted, but remember this. Even in victory, weakness will be punished." Tony smirked beneath his helmet, energy pulsing across his armor. "And I've learned something too. Doom, survival isn't just about power. It's about knowing when to fight side by side, even with someone you despise." The galaxy, though scarred, had been irrevocably changed. Two outsiders had arrived and altered the very structure of the Imperium, proving that even in the grim darkness of the far future, intelligence, ambition, and daring could bend fate itself. And somewhere, deep within the warp, entities older than stars watched, intrigued by the anomaly of two mortals who had dared to play with gods. The war was not over, not truly, but for now, Tony Stark and Dr. Doom stood victorious, if only temporarily, united by circumstance yet divided by ambition, legends forged in fire and shadow.